Okay, so we have set in the basic branch structure, and now we need to clean up this. And let me zoom in a little. So here it's very untidy everywhere. And we need also, what is not visible now is that the foot should, the leg should angle in this direction. So I need to remove material on this side so that I get the angling of the leg. And we see here the wrench in the back view also gives us that we here have a very small area. It goes like this and this. Here's a deepening. This is sometimes not very much visible, but here from this view this is how you see it in most people, but this indent here is not always visible on people, but it is separates heel, and here this is a cartilage masses. Okay, and then so we need to bring this in. So I go inside here a little and also here to separate the French structure from the, okay, and it should angle even more. Okay, not pretty as I said, but it comes along. So now we look from the front. Now we see a little this angling, that's nice. Here we should push for backwards to get it. Yes, now that's coming along. So that's the inside. Here should be quite high. And make the separation underneath. And now let's clean up a little so that we can see better what we are doing. And shortly we will make the detail size a little smaller so that our sculpt looks more natural. Of course, our leg should be round and not boxy in the front. And as you see, we don't sculpt the detailed foot, but just with the main features. We don't sculpt, in this tutorial at least, details like veins or something like that. This you can do afterwards when you like, and embellish your sculpt with veins and toenails and so on. We don't do this in this tutorial because that's easy and fun. You can explore this by yourself. Okay, I think we get the structure now correct. And now we should detail our main forms a little more. And now I decrease the detail size to something like 10 or a little less. Yeah, 8 is fine. So now I try to bring in a little more of the shapes. So now I want to bring in these forms here I indicated for the toes. So first I want to see on the top where my toes go. Let me see where the separations are there. So the toes go about here. This is the area for the knuckles. And also one thing which is common in most feet is that the big toe is really separated from the other toes, so that here is actually a space in between. We cannot see that too well in this photo, but here we can see that the background is peeking through, and this space is usually there in all feet that are healthy. So we make the separation for the big toe, and they are just indicate the other ones, something like that. And now we want to bring in this form here. We said the big toe is different, so we first do the other ones. And yes, so it goes, first it goes almost horizontal, and then it goes, here is, this part is almost horizontal, and then it goes down strongly, and then once again. So I raise this a little more here so that I can make it horizontal, something like that. And then it goes down strongly. And even more, let's cut in here a little more so that it bends. Now we see nicely these planes, and then at the front they are not that horizontal, but they try to grab into the floor. So, oops, wrong brush. They're not really horizontal, but the toes try to grab into the ground, into the floor. That is these toes. And the other one, the big toe, we said it goes softly downwards and then curls up again a little. So we make it softly go downwards and it curls up, and that means we can add here a little more material so that we later see this curl of the toe. Okay, so now let's shape it a little more clearly, and I look from time to time to the reference photos, or you could look to your own photo or your own foot actually. Let me see, can we see here? From the side view we see that the toe needs to go much higher here, so I carve in deeper, and now we see that that's coming along nicely, something like that. And here's this big cushion underneath, so we want to see that later in our sculpt, so I try to emphasize in the moment and cut in to separate from the other toes. And here we really want to separate it. Let's see how we can. So I try to push this material backwards. This is in Blender a little more easy than in ZBrush, but so we need to, I exaggerate this separation a little, but that is always good in sculpting to make clear statements, so it's better to exaggerate something than to be too timid. Okay, so, and here's goes inside, and here's a big knuckle. When you compare your feet with your hands, you will see that the feet are actually very similar in structure to hands, so they have the same number of joints in the toes like in the fingers. So here's a big joint here in this area, so that's why I'm covering in here a little to make me able to see this better. Yes, and this is this cartilage here underneath, and we cut in here a little more to show it. And now we are here already in this cushion. Oh no, not quite, I'm sorry, this was not should go upwards like this and sculpt around. And you see, this is now, we have the main structures in, and now we need to go over each part and clean up. And so we have the big toe roughed in, and in the next video we go to the other toes. Okay, so now we try to get in the other toes about. So I first redraw the separation of the other toes. They are, when we look here, about the same size, and the last toe is sometimes considerably smaller. So we try to get the middle ones about the same size. Yes, about here and about here. And this will be the last toe, the small ones. Okay, so we have the knuckles about, and I now try to get even deeper. I think I need to even smaller detail size so that I can cut in deeper. And since we are sculpting, we don't need to care really that we cut through here, as we can if we want to, but we not really need to do this to sculpt convincing feet. We can just make the cuts deep enough so that it looks like they were going through. This is how, when you study marble sculpts, for example, marble carvings, then you will see, oops, why is this? Okay, that is a little, the direction is a little off here, something like that. Then things like toes and fingers and so are often not separated, but just indicated the separations. And this is for good reason, because marble is very brittle, and the toes, if they were sculpted or carved like so, I make now these cushions underneath here to define the toes from underneath. The cushions are about the same size and more long than wide. So we need to, and the last two. If they were carving the toes separately, they most likely would break off at the first rough handling of the sculpture, and so the toes are generally not sculpted completely, but just indicated. And we can do this in digital sculpting too. It saves time and hassle. And when we really want to make a good foot later, we can retopo, and in the retopo part we can separate the toes, so we don't need to worry about it too much when we sculpt, but we can do this when we want in the retopo part of the sculpting. So now you see what I use a scrape brush and push in a little inside here so that we can see later, when I have finished with this, see better where the knuckles of the toes are. The knuckles sit, of course, here at this bend, and so I carve in with a scrape brush just a little bit on either side. And this separates the knuckles. You see, now it's already, when we rotate the foot, it looks more like knuckles than when it's just here. Maybe I need to cut a little deeper. So scrape in a little. This rounds off the toes and prepares the knuckles. Now I can add a little material here to even emphasis where the knuckles are. Maybe push this even more. And now we need to make our toes a little roundish on the front. So maybe this is also a good job for the scrape tool. The scrape tool is really great for shaping. So we need to make a round cushion here underneath. I think that looks pretty good. And from here, and I cut deeper where it is necessary, but I really don't care to carve the separations completely here. This is not important to understand the feet, and a good sculpture not depends on if you carve in these. Oops, I'm sorry. Sometimes the view behaves a little odd. I don't know what is doing this, but here we go further and round off these cushions, and we try to see if they would fit nicely onto the floor. I think here is some material missing, so I add a little more here and round. No, that was not the best idea, so we remove it again. You see, there are always possibilities to correct the mistakes. And now the little toe, and the little toe in some people actually does not go down to the floor. So this also depends. Make it a little more here and carve in a little more here to show. Okay, I think we are coming along nicely now. So I try to, when we see these cushions here, they make very hard shadows here on this side. Let me remove the grease pencil. Hard shadows, and this means this wall here is rather steep. So we try to make this too, and to get this we add first material and then cut with a crease brush inside. And here's something messy. Okay, so let's see. So then we need to show that these are actually two cushions. They're not very much separated, but when you touch your own feet, you will notice that here is a cushion, and here and inside you can press in your fingers much easier than, for example, at these areas. And we want to capture this in the sculpt too, because this is an anatomical feature. So I make first the indents between the cushions rather strong, and later we will almost remove it. So then we will see later really the softness of this transition at the right place. From underneath it looks pretty good already. I'm still not very happy with the heel, and maybe we got our foot a little wide. Let me see from top. Yes, it is quite wide, but I think it still is believable. So I try now to now let's see at the reference photos from this view. we see here this cushion on the side, and we see here, when we look closely, here's a kind of a rim around from the heel. Here's some rim area, and here this is from the cushion, and we want to have this also in our sculpt. So I first cut in about, this is where the cushion is, here's about where the heel goes. It goes around, and we get this indent which we see here. It goes around, and on the outside here we see that it's very close to our knuckle here, down, and here something like that, and here's this cushion from the little toe. Okay, so now we scrape our foot a little smaller. So why is it looking too wide? When we look here, we see that the plane we have here on top is too wide already at the top. So we need to correct this, and then we will get the foot in itself smaller and slimmer, and then it will look correct. We do this in the next video. Okay, so now we want to correct this plane here. We said it is too wide here at the ankle, so we try to correct this. I have the scrape brush, and now I push in, and I need to look. It is going wider to the little toe, and I first can paint or draw in with the crease brush the line where I should go, and then I use my scrape brush and scrape this down here towards this line I have drawn. You see, I try to bring it on the correct width so that it blends in with a lower part, which looked pretty good. Make this just a little rounder here, so it's too boxy. And now we see the foot is here still a little wide, so let's zoom in and push here even a little more. Maybe I need to cut in even to get it closer, and even more. Now it's coming along. You see, always look and try to understand if your sculpt is doing what it should be, and if not, concentrate first to correct your mistakes before you go on and sculpt something else. Otherwise you would forget it later, and then you have this mistake and don't understand it anymore. So, and now we see that the ankle is really exaggerated because I pushed the material here, now correct, but this is no problem. The general shape is okay, but we need to push it back a little so that it's not that much protruding. Yes, that's fine. You see how you can really use this scrape brush for sculpting. If you are doing this sculpt in ZBrush, then I would recommend to use a trim dynamic brush for the same. It's very similar to the scrape brush in action, and I really like in ZBrush using the trim dynamic brush for this kind of work. And the scrape brush in Blender is really a really wonderful brush for sculpting. Okay, and now we need to this here of course is way too boxy. We made this to understand the structure, and now we see here this everything should be rounded. So we go now and round this off, and try to blend it into the lower area. And now when we round this off, then automatically the main structure is correct, because we first did it in a very exaggerated way. So let's see. I think I have it a little too large, so I push it even more and cut away. Oops, I'm sorry. Maybe it's a recording that sometimes is a little demanding, and then the viewport is not acting as nicely as I'm used to to it. Okay, so now this structure here, we had said here are such curves. Let me draw them in again, like this and like this. This is again exaggerated, and we won't see this in our sculpt too, but still don't. So first I scrape over so that the polygons are replaced and I can see better the forms we have already. And now we see it should go inside. And then swing outwards. Something, it's too much, too fat. Okay, we had brought down this side correctly, so let's do first this side. Swings outwards. And now here we need to first round off the angle here. Again, I'm using the scrape brush and round off. Yeah, I need to cut in deeper in a moment. Round off and round off. You see, since I'm using the scrape brush and not smoothing, I could use smoothing, but with a scrape brush I have more control over the form that is developing, and the smooth brush, that's an algorithm that is working and it does its thing, but you lose a little of the control, and that's why I'm doing this kind of smoothing and so on with a scrape brush. Then I can shape while I'm smoothing. So I need to carve in here. Yeah, it's good. Carve in here a little more. This will raise the ankle again. I think it's in the back view, it's a little too wide when we compare here. Yes, we have too much material here. As you see now, it's the face, the part of the sculpting where we look at the reference photos and try to see if we get close, and if not, so now I'm trying to get this round stuff here in the back, and here we see a slope we haven't yet. And how far is the slope? It's about the height of this angle here, a little lower. So I cut in first. Look, it's about here. And a little more. And then I use again the scrape brush and push this down and blend in. Oops, sorry. And in this direction too. And blend in. Okay, my heel is still a little boxy, so let me add a little material. It should go straight down about. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm losing my window. So let me see. Good. Okay, so now we see on this side the foot still looks awkward, and this is because we haven't worked here on this area. And can we see? Yes, here we see it slopes down dramatically here, and here we see that it let me draw it. Here's a plane like this, so we need to scrape in here a plane. So we scrape in a little plane, and we try to see where the tendons and bones of this big toe are. So that's about where this line, highlighted line, is here. And now I try to make it go down and go down. You see, it's still boxy, but we can make it round in the end easily. So the first is to get the structures right. And let me see. I still think here this should go down a little more so that we can see and blend in. And now when we did this, while we did this, we see that this cushion underneath is now better visible, as it should be. So far our foot looks best from below, so we need to work a little more on the top. The structure is already quite good. I'm not so happy with this one, so we will address this in the next video.